Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode. We got a Sunday episode. We usually film Mondays, drop it on Tuesday because there's so mumuch shit has happened in the NHL the last couple of days. Babiak, how you doing?
I'm great. Love a Sunday pod. Birds are playing in like an
Mhm.
hour, so there's a 50-50 chance this is going to be really funny by the time you guys get to see it. Can't wait.
Jaden Daniels cements the greatest rookie season of all time. But yeah, we had to hop on this because clearly we got stuff like Mikko Rantanen getting traded to the Carolina Hurricanes, Tony DeAngelo to my New York Islanders, as well as Will Borgen signing a decent extension, Markstrom hurt, Monahan out 6 to 8 more weeks, and then at the end we're going to do both a Necas Would You Rather as well as take some of your takes and say whether or not we agree or disagree. So yeah, we got some stories to talk about compared to prior weeks where it has maybe just been talking about JT Miller, talking about the New York Rangers for the past couple weeks. But yeah, Mikko Rantanen, officially a member of the Carolina Hurricanes. The full details are to Carolina, 50% of Mikko Rantanen, 50% of his salary, not 50% of the player. Taylor Hall to Carolina as well. The Colorado Avalanche got Drury, Necas, a second and a fourth from the Carolina Hurricanes. And then Chicago, because they retained $4.625 million for Mikko Rantanen, they got their own third back that was previously traded at the 2024 deadline. So that's like basically a late second, probably going to be either the first, second, or third pick in the third round. Yeah, I'll let you go first because I did make a quick little reaction. We're definitely going to dive into it more, but I think most people that are watching this probably watched that video as well. So we'll start with you and then work our way.
All
Just
right,
breaking it
yeah.
down.
I think a lot of people have already said their takes with Rantanen and Necas as players and fits. So to me, at this point, that's like the least interesting part. Yes, Carolina needed that top line scorer, that elite superstar guy. If Colorado had to make this trade for salary reasons, Necas, I guess, was the best option available. I've been saying for a couple weeks now that I saw Necas as a fit in a potential Vancouver swap. Clearly, Carolina sort of agreed with that, but they had a chance to get an even better player than the ones Vancouver was trading. So good for them jumping on that. More in the details, everything about the Chicago bit of this kind of confuses me. I think it's botched asset management from Chicago to retain that much on Rantanen and send out Taylor Hall and only get a third. Like that salary retention on its own should be worth a third, you would think. So Taylor Hall is just a free throw in. And I also don't really get why Carolina would want Taylor Hall. He's not a Carolina player, right?
Yeah,
He's not
that's
a
interesting.
200-foot guy. He's not a high motor guy. Maybe Brindamore can refix him because Taylor Hall, the last time he looked actually good was in that third line role in a very defensive team in Boston. So maybe that's the vision. You do something there. He was on the fourth line yesterday for Carolina. So that's a weird fit to me. I don't know why you would want or need Taylor Hall to come in on the fourth line if you're Carolina. But like the main part, of course,
We're not throwing out
Rantanen is
there.
going to make them like to me, cup favorites right now.
Ooh, favorites in the entire league. He is that much of an upgrade. I agree, he's a massive upgrade over Martin Necas. I don't know if I would go that far. I obviously love it for Carolina, even if it is just a rental to get that upgrade from Necas, from Rantanen. We're going on year 6, maybe 5 of Carolina being a top tier contender. They never made really any trade deadline deals before last season when they got Jake Gensel. So it just, I love the aggressiveness from a guy like Eric Tulsky that is one of the most unique minds in the entire NHL, graduated from like MIT and Cal. It's just an absolute genius. So it's very innovative. In terms of Taylor Hall, I can see some kind of fit there. I think that if he gets back to what we saw maybe 2 to 3 years ago, he can be a solid scoring winger. You still look at Carolina's top 9, and it's not that impressive. I think that they do need some kind of scoring, even though they might be sacrificing some defense in that. From the Chicago perspective, I think it's fine. I get that they are eating that much money, and you maybe could have got a second round pick. But again, a second round pick from Carolina or Colorado only would have been 10 picks ahead of what their third round pick's going to be. So I don't think it's that bad. Taylor Hall was at a sizable cap hit at around like $5 million, I think, or maybe even $6 million. So even him at half retained, you probably would have only gotten a fourth round pick or a late third round pick. So I don't hate them doing this. Yes, you maybe could have gotten something more later down the line to retain on a kind of deal. But if you're Chicago, you didn't really have that much to sell at this year's deadline. So just call it quits, get Taylor Hall out, and get your third round pick back. Colorado, it's interesting. We talk about the internal cap that they kept on repeating. And if that is the case, and Mikko Rantanen was like willing to take a $13.25 million deal, I think they're stupid as hell. Like, if that comes out, then I would agree that this was stupid by Colorado. Mikko Rantanen is not as good as Nathan MacKinnon, but guess what? He signed 3 years later. The cap is going to jump like $8 million comparatively when MacKinnon signed. So it's all going to come down to that from a Colorado perspective. I see people saying that Carolina didn't trade a first-round pick and they got Mikko Rantanen. Martin Necas, even though I'm not the biggest believer in him and he's been cold the last 2 months at this point, he is still an extremely valuable asset. And you could argue next year, Mikko Rantanen at 13, I'd rather have Martin Necas at 6.5, just solely next year. Necas is going to need some kind of deal, and it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that. But yeah, Martin Necas is a damn good player. Drury can maybe develop into. They definitely still need forward depth, so that's a solid pickup for them. I think he actually just scored in the New York Rangers game that happened right before this when you're watching it. But yeah, I think it's just a solid deal for both teams. I know Colorado's going to get eviscerated, but Mikko Rantanen just needs this mega deal, and if this mega deal comes in at 13.75. I get the Colorado Avalanche basically saying, we'll take Blackwood and Necas. We'll be a more balanced and deep team by doing so instead of locking up two players at what? Over $25 million, $26 million. And Cale Makar obviously is going to need a mega deal. So having those three guys at $40 million, yes, the cap is going up, but still they look to maybe like a Toronto that locked up their guys massively and then did not have a lot of flexibility. So yeah, I think it's a very good deal all around for all parties involved. Anything else you got?
Yeah,
several. I just yapped for a while, so please pick that apart.
I mean, I agree for one thing that Necas as a player is right. If you're Colorado and you're trying to trade for a Necas level talent, that's probably multiple first round picks, right? To have a 1.5 season, 2 playoff runs worth of Necas. So like clearly, first round picks, that's not an issue here. They got an actual good player who can immediately jump into their top 6, top power play, probably be a point per game player. I guess he could be the 2C if you want. He wasn't really playing center in Carolina by the end of his run. His success this year has come on the wing. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him just slot right in on MacKinnon's wing either. Full agree on this internal cap. Like, if the issue is about MacKinnon's ego and paying him more than MacKinnon,
MacKinnon, in fairness, did say like he doesn't give a crap about money. I'm sure it's the brass just being like, you're not better than Nathan MacKinnon. But
yeah, but it's good for MacKinnon that he would say that. It's nice that it's not an ego thing for him. But like it's fundamentally not how a salary cap sport works. That the best player is the one making the most money. The really good player who signed most recently is going to be the one making the most money because the cap goes up every year. That's how it works. Some hockey fans don't seem to understand that that's how it works, which drives me crazy. Like, yeah, it's like, there was that one year in the NBA where Mike Conley was the highest paid player because he happened to sign the max contract there. And that happens similarly in hockey too. But like a quarter of hockey fans, it seems to fry their brains when someone worse than McDavid or MacKinnon signs for more money than those guys.
Yeah. When MacKinnon signed his deal at $12.6 million, there was criticism for that as well, considering Connor McDavid only made 12.5. Now that's genuinely it was like my second best deal in the entire NHL, despite being that much money, because he is a superstar talent. And we see it. You mentioned the NBA, the NFL, basically every top when a top 15 quarterback comes up and needs a new contract, they become the highest paid guy because the salary cap is just ever expanding. I feel like fans are starting to learn that. That really started with Austin Matthews getting that 13.25. People started to catch on, and Leon Draisaitl really blew that out of the water. So, Rantanen deserves 13.25. Do I think 14 would be a good deal? I probably wouldn't. If he was your best forward, like he might be on Carolina, yeah, maybe you suck it up and give him that kind of money, because although you really like Sebastian Aho, maybe he just doesn't have that offensive ceiling as a number one on a Stanley Cup team. But in Colorado, you have a star center that makes everybody around him better. He turned Jonathan Drouin into like a league minimum guy, back into a 56-point player. Like Nathan MacKinnon is that special talent where you're not beholden to lock up this guy. The Toronto Maple Leafs honestly should although Marner has been the MVP of the Leafs, if he wants $13.5, $14 million, maybe you also kind of work on some kind of trade with that, considering you have 2 other star forwards. But yeah, for Colorado, it's just really going to come down to whatever the deal ends up being. What do you think if he hits the open market? Do you think? I think unrestricted free agency, he might get like 14,
I think unrestricted
14.25.
free agency, he's going to end up signing either the Draisaitl deal or just like a tiny bit below. Carolina has the cap space for it no matter what, but Rantanen's in a position where, like, if he really wants the money, he can absolutely extort Carolina, right? He can say, okay, you guys have Burns and Orlov coming off your books this summer. There's 13 mil for me, plus, you know, the Necas money that's no longer there. You paid this much in trade assets to get me, so you're going to need to pay up to keep me. And, like, what else is Carolina going to do? I guess, you know, pay Marner in free agencies a plan B, but otherwise it's like either you spend all that money on Rantanen, or else if he just walks like Gensel, you're stuck with this money now. You had a ton of money coming off your books this summer, and you can't even really use it on anything super helpful or productive. So I think it won't. I think he'll sign with Carolina, re-sign, and I don't think it'll be quite at 14. But if he hits the UFA market, I think he can get 14. And from Rantanen's perspective, what loyalty do I have to Carolina?
None.
Why shouldn't I hit the UFA market instead of signing early, unless Carolina is going to give me, you know, basically the money I want on the 8 years?
And I believe Carolina is not state tax free. They do have state income
There's some
tax.
state tax there.
Yeah, so it's not like if he went to Vegas and then he signed some kind of $13 million, it wouldn't be exactly comparable to, say, Colorado, considering the state tax. And yeah, I think he'll get, I think he might get like 14.25 on the open market. I think that there would be an insane bidding war, considering the cap might not just jump $4 million. There was a report, what was it, 2 weeks ago, that it might jump like $8 million, considering they've stopped the escrow payments. And yeah, I wouldn't blame a team on the open market that's desperate. Like, you look at a Utah hockey club that has a bunch of young, exciting forwards. Clayton Keller is a very good player, but a splashy kind of deal like that by a guy like Ryan Smith, he'd be the best unrestricted free agent without a doubt since John Tavares.
Easily.
And rivals Tavares just because he's been so good in the playoffs. He's only 27 or 28 years old. I hope he hits unrestricted free agency. That would be absolutely insane in terms of covering that, because yeah, people would sell off cap space like you would not believe to potentially be in the Mikko Rantanen sweepstakes. And at this point, yeah, I think it is very possible that he goes into it. If he wasn't able to strike up some kind of Colorado deal, and Carolina, I was pretty surprised when they didn't have an extension in place, giving up a guy like Martin Necas in a second and a fourth round pick that is a decent price, to not have that extension in place. And as you mentioned, Carolina will have the money to re-sign him, considering those two defensemen come off the books, and they got like everybody else locked in pretty cheap. Svechnikov only makes like 7.75. Aho makes 9.75. Jarvis's deal is already amazing at $7.4 million. They have Chekhov at $2 million. They'd have to re-sign Freddie or get some kind of backup. But yeah, they have like $30 million in cap space or something like that. Most of the teams signed next season. So as an Islanders fan, I hope that he hits unrestricted free agency, or the Carolina Hurricanes pay him like $14.5 million. But them with Rantanen will just be a terror force over the next 5 years if he signs in the Metropolitan, unfortunately.
And we've been talking a lot about the Carolina end of this, I feel. As far as the Colorado end of this goes, I mean, I personally did not think they were real contenders to begin with, because I don't trust their depth and I don't trust their goalie.
You don't like Blackwood.
No, but I'm curious now for you. Like, do you think that they are actually contenders this season at this point?
McFarland, in an interview with LeBron, I think it was, said that they're still trying to win it this season. It definitely dings their odds from Stanley Cup odds from like 9% to like 6%. They definitely could, because again, they fit the billing of having a superstar forward, superstar defenseman, very good number 2 in Devon Toews. But yeah, it just seems, unless Landeskog somehow comes back and is 2022 Landeskog, they just don't have it this season. It's kind of maybe a little bit of a retool, which, funny enough, we thought this was going to be a retool season for Carolina after last year really going for it, but now they're yet again a top tier contender. But yeah, I think this is definitely more of a long-term play than a short-term. You can't convince me that after downgrading from Rantanen to Necas, you're feeling extremely confident in the group this season. I think they're going to have some sizable cap space now that they don't have Rantanen, $13-14 million, like you talked about when they signed Blackwood, that could have led to Rantanen not getting that money. So yeah, I think They're definitely not punting on this season. I think they still might flip that second round pick for some cheaper guy that's a rental or maybe has like a year or two left on his contract. But this season, if you're a Colorado Avalanche fan, I don't think your expectations are that high, especially when you're seeing other teams in the Western Conference that probably are going to be very, very aggressive at the deadline in terms of acquiring top end talent. It's possible, but yeah, they're in the last wild card right now in terms of points percentage. They're below the Calgary Flames. So I would expect another first or second round exit from Colorado.
Yeah, I agree. I think first round exit is the most likely way that this shakes out. They are set up now. They can do some fun things in the summer and kind of retool for next year and have actually a much stronger team next year, maybe than they had at the start of this year or last year. But yeah, it's you're still trying to go for it. You're still in a playoff spot. You have the players in their prime. You're going to make the playoffs this year. But yeah, I don't see them really making any noise within there. And who knows how much money Necas might want, because there were definitely rumors that he was not at all happy with whatever Carolina was negotiating. Maybe there was locker room friction there. It's not super clear. But the vibe of pretty much everyone around Carolina was there's no way we're going to re-sign Necas next summer. Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with the money. It's just he doesn't want to play here and we're not going to be able to keep him.
Yeah, and it worked out perfectly because he started out so good where you could sell him high for such a player. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. Again, referring back to the Rantanen extension, this trade is going to have a lot to do when the dust settles with what they do with Monahan Out. If they give him some kind of 8-year deal at 8.5 and then Rantanen signs for 8 years, 12.75, it's an utter disaster for Colorado. But yeah, I think he's going to want a big deal. He's still going to be a restricted free agent, I believe, maybe. Yeah, I think so. But yeah, hopefully Colorado gets some kind of 5-year deal, $7.5 million. I think would be really good for both parties. And I think Necas can be a reliable 65 to 75 point guy, especially if he's playing with Nathan MacKinnon, maybe even point per game. Of course, there is a little bit of a MacKinnon tax on that, but he's going to be a valuable piece in their top six, a top six that after Casey Middlestat kind of disappointed, they definitely needed to retool to some degree. So yeah, I think it's pretty solid.
And another kind of offshoot of this, a ripple effect to me, because I saw Carolina as one of the main teams that might be in for the Vancouver guys. Mm-hmm. And now there's not a ton of options, I feel, for like who might want to buy in on Miller and or Pettersson right now.
Yeah, it's looking like it's just the Rangers, which good for them. Maybe they can drive the price down and it can just be like Philip Hedl and Ryan Lindgren, no first-round pick, or maybe that gets downgraded to a second-round pick. But it is crazy how they went from potentially getting JT Miller, who's old and has 5 years left after this at $8 million and was going to cost them Martin Necas, to now getting Mikko Rantanen. I don't know what Vancouver's going to do. Apparently now Elias Pettersson, there's rumors that they're willing to trade Pettersson now because they think that they're going to get some kind of assets in return. But yeah, Vancouver's just an absolute shit show. The fact that Carolina was able to do this in one night, Carolina and Colorado were able to do this in one night, no media buzz. Meanwhile, the past 2 weeks have been an utter shit show in Vancouver. Just goes to show that those two organizations are run by real pros. Meanwhile, Vancouver, not saying Alvin and Rutherford are bad, but they definitely have loose lips, and it's bled clearly into the ice. Although they beat the Washington Capitals last night, it's just made a public disaster. And even though they traded Mikko Rantanen, you have guys like MacKinnon coming out and saying like it's devastating, but we just got to move on. I'm here for the next 7 years. I'm going to try to make it the best that I possibly can. Best of luck to Mikko, but we're still trying to win a cup, and that's our end goal. Cale Makar and him locked up, hopefully long term. Meanwhile, Vancouver's a total shit show.
It's rough up there. I mean,
it's crazy. The last 12 months, like you thought that they won the Stanley Cup when they were in first in the Pacific Division at the end of last season, and their dynasty was just starting out. Meanwhile, it's an absolute shit show. But we don't have to talk about Vancouver anymore. Anything else you got on this?
Anything else I got on this?
Again, Chicago, it's Hall. Maybe Hall resigns this summer in Chicago or something like that. They need to do something in terms of bringing in not some superstar on some 8-year deal. It's 28, 29 years old and it's going to age bad. But they definitely need to use some of their assets to get maybe like a 24-year-old good player from a team that's selling. You can't just continue to sell like this and surround Bedard with basically nothing. Maybe they get the top 4 pick this year and get a young forward, but they need something, as we were talking about with San Jose, how they've surrounded their talent pretty well. Chicago, man.
Yeah,
Not
it's
good.
Bedard's being set up to fail because you have a center with no one to pass to. Of course, there's going to be issues. You don't even really give him weapons in the first place. Like, it sucks in a way that you're trading away all of his weapons. But like, to begin with, Chicago was exclusively signing like 30-something-year-old, way past their prime wings to work with him. Like, of course, those were never going to be the best possible options.
Yeah, like I thought maybe Martin Necas could make sense in Carolina in terms of getting a guy that's entering his prime that could play with Connor Bedard. You heard rumors that they were potentially in on Mikko Rantanen or Pettersson in the last year. Instead, they're just holding the bag. There's a funny tweet of like a guy who's like Chris Farley, like being like hot and like shocked. But it's like when Connor Bedard sees that Mikko Rantanen's on the cap sheet, but not on the actual team. And yeah, it's just unfortunate, but I think they did solid in this deal. I think a lot of people didn't understand because it's Chicago's own pick. They thought that that they didn't get a pick in this, or like they shipped out a 4th-round pick and only got a 3rd-round pick. There was a lot of like hate for Chicago.
I don't love it for Chicago. It's not the worst thing in the world. I just think it's kind of like, it's unfortunate how poorly Taylor Hall has played this year that like they can't get an asset for him, because I look at this again as like the 3rd is for retaining on Rantanen. Taylor Hall is literally a free throw-in at that point, which maybe you're right. And it's just, there was literally no market to trade Taylor Hall. No one really wanted him like that. And he has to be a throw-in. But that's really, it's tough asset management for Chicago if that's how it goes out.
Yeah, I just don't know like how these GMs view people, cap hit, cap flexibility after the Trouba trade. that just threw me for an absolute loop. Like, I mean, there's some absolute dummies out there, so I'm not going to kill Kyle Davidson for getting an early 3rd-round pick for doing this.
I mean, like, who does Chicago even have that you theoretically could trade for a first? Like, there are other bad teams, tanking teams, where it's like, okay, if San Jose wanted to trade a Granlund, they'd get a first for him, no doubt. Chicago doesn't have anyone even remotely close to that.
Yeah, they sold before Bedard was even on the team. They got rid of Brandon Hagel, Patrick Kane,
so like
Max Domi.
They're like out of ways to get new draft picks. This is it for them. It's just their own picks.
They have a large quantity of prospects. Will they pan out? We will definitely see, but none of them are really NHL ready as of right now. Frank Nazar has debuted of late and been okay, but I don't think he's going to be riding shotgun to 60+ point seasons with Connor Bedard anytime soon. But yeah, for Chicago, they're in a interesting spot because the future core just isn't on the ice right now and they stink. So you want to surround Bedard, but you don't want to overspend, over term to get guys, which they kind of did honestly with Teravainen and Bertuzzi, but those are only 3 to 4 year deals. They need to do something. They need to swing on some kind of deal relatively soon, or else I'm not saying their rebuild's going to fail, but it's just getting ugly for Connor Bedard, who has been playing better of late, but definitely should be hopefully reaching another level this season or next. Anything else you got on the right?
That's all we got on Rantanen.
23 minutes on that. Okay, next up, we are going to talk about Tony DeAngelo heading to the New York Islanders. If you're listening to the podcast, I just ripped off a red hat shirt. Thanos wearing a red hat. Make the universe great again. Not a MAGA hat, but it felt fitting for Tony DeAngelo. Controversial figure, but the New York Islanders needed him. I'll go first on this one. After Dobson suffered that injury where his leg, I don't know if you saw that. I don't recommend looking it up, but if you do, you know that's probably going to be minimum 4 weeks. Thankfully, Four Nations Face-Off is kind of like a built-in 2-week break for those that are dealing with injuries right now, but he's going to miss some decent games, and the Islanders appear like they might still be going for it. So with Tony DeAngelo, yes, he doesn't play defense, but this team doesn't really need defensive defensemen. They need offensive, puck-moving, right-handed defensemen as of right now. And Ryan Pollock, funny enough, got hurt within a minute of Tony DeAngelo's debut. So they really need righties. And yeah, Tony, I don't like the guy. I don't like him as a player, and he's definitely somewhat of a jerk, it seems, based on his locker room antics. And I don't care about the political stuff. Every single NHL player, for the most part, is a Republican that wants their taxes lower. But yeah, I think just in terms of a move, it's solid. I think Tony DeAngelo can be a solid puck-moving defenseman. The power play, he had a really sick pass to Bo Horvat, just perfectly hit him in stride that almost led to a goal, but Kochetkov made a great poke check on that last night. But yeah, I think Tony DeAngelo can be an effective. He played 25 minutes last night, but that was because of Polak. An effective 20-ish minute offensive defenseman. And then you maybe can flip him at the deadline. He's only making $775,000. So might as well. It's definitely not a good. I feel bad for those working in the Islanders PR and social media departments. They got absolutely ratioed to hell. But I think in terms of a move, now at this team with Polak and Dobson out maybe for a prolonged period of time, you couldn't be rolling out Dennis Cholowski on the power play one. You had to go out and do something like this. I prefer this compared to trading a second or third round pick from some tanking team for a 29, 30-year-old defenseman that Lou probably would have given some absurd deal to this summer. So yeah, it's a decent little tryout, prove it deal, last chance, not a second chance. It's like his fourth chance in the NHL. But why not for a team that already has such low public support? Can't go much lower. Tony DeAngelo, New York Islander, thought he played pretty decent in the debut. What do you think?
I think the contract is decent, but I still absolutely hate the move. I mean, we all know what Tony DeAngelo is, right? He is a pretty good power play quarterback, one of the best ones in the league as a defenseman. And in literally every other part of the sport of hockey, he's a third pair guy, total liability. But, you get him on a minimum contract. That's fine. Fair enough. Like you said, the Islanders are a team that needs that. They're last in the East in scoring. They could use someone who fits that profile. But then you also talk about their injuries, and you talk about they're probably still trying to go for it. And that's where I have the problem, right? I look at this signing, and it's like, okay, so Lou, you're trying to sell us on the vision that even though Noah Dobson is going to be out long term, and even though you're this far out of a playoff spot, we still intend to go for it. That's the wrong. That is so the wrong move. What this franchise needs to do right now is accept that this is going to be a lost season. Trade away Brock Nelson, get your mid-first round pick for him. See if anyone else on the team has any real value to someone else who's a real contender. And start trying to transition, become a little bit younger, gain a couple of futures. What this signing tells me is Lou has no interest in that. Lou is just looking at this and saying, how do we maximize our chances of slipping into the 8 seed this year? And if that means letting Brock Nelson leave as a free agent in July and missing the playoffs anyway, it would absolutely hurt this franchise.
Yeah, I think that logic is definitely what they're thinking. They are hot of late. They're only a couple points back. I believe they're slightly
literally everyone is only a couple points back.
I know, but I told you 3 weeks ago we did the traded or not with the deadline targets, and I said Brock Nelson not traded because I knew that this mini run was going to happen. We'll see if it sustains, considering now Dobson and Polak are out. But yeah, dude, I know my New York Islanders. They're going to go on a little bit of a run. They're going to show life. They're going to be 3 points out. Lose either not going to do anything or honestly buy, and we're going to be stuck in hell. Ideally, Tony DeAngelo comes in, plays 13 games, puts up 8 points, and then we flip him for a third-round pick. But no, I think that this Islanders team is going to prove it to Lou that they don't want to sell, and the core is still important. And Nelson's either going to leave for nothing or a 6-year deal at 34 years old or something like that. But just this isolated deal, I think it's very sound logic-wise.
It also runs the locker room risk for sure. I mean, like you said it yourself, right? It's not really about the politics because most of the NHL has that politics. That's true. The problem is he's just an asshole. Like, I don't think he had whatever confrontation fight he had with Alex Georgiev about politics necessarily, but he had that confrontation or fight or whatever it was, and it was so bad that the New York Rangers immediately got rid of him. And the Rangers were like the 4th team he was on because everyone else kept trading him around and not wanting him.
Yeah, he got suspended in the Arizona for slurs or something like that. It's not good. Yeah, I'm sure I would not get along with him. I'm sure I would not enjoy sharing a beer with him. But I think that this really is his final chance in the NHL. Like, if he sours this especially from locker room perspective, let alone on the ice, if he's just horrible defensively, and it is a mid-season thing, I think DeAngelo is going to be on the best best behavior possible, or just tone down his assholeness, be quiet in that locker room. He was sticking up for Hogberg last night after there was a little bit of a scrum. But yeah, I think he can pull it together. If they sign him to some kind of 2-3 year deal after this and he has some job security, yeah, maybe he'll start Tony D'ing it up in the locker room. But right now, it's crazy that I'm rooting for Tony DeAngelo. Like, I just can't. Like, I made a video a week ago being like, there was some video like, Tony DeAngelo was exiled from the NHL. Like, why was Tony DeAngelo? Like, he just stinks at defense. And then I had that alert go off.
And it's also worth saying here, he had very good numbers in Russia in the KHL. There's a lot less talent in Russia today than there was like 4 years ago pre-war. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to put those numbers on a curve, right? In 2018, the KHL had a bunch of guys from all over Europe who were, NHL caliber at one point in their careers and would play there. Since the Ukraine war, the rest of Europe is not going over there. I mean, there are some North Americans who are being exiled, who are happy to play in Russia.
Boucher, who's got convicted of some kind of crime, I think.
But, we have sent a couple sex offenders over to the KHL. Let's be direct about that. But as far as like the Swedish-Finnish to KHL pipeline, that's very much dried up. So you kind of have to put those KHL numbers from this season on a curve, and it's not as impressive as it looks.
Yeah. I'm not expecting much, but if he plays 18 to 20 minutes a night, is just bad defensively, not horrible. Like, there's not one or two plays that almost lead to a goal every single game because of Tony DeAngelo, and he can perform offensively. I think it's fine. I think it's fine as long as there's hopefully no long-term extension after that. But you want to stick in New York with another defenseman that we got to talk about?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. Thankfully, after the Tony DeAngelo debacle, I was able to rip on the New York Rangers because they gave Will Borgen a 5-year deal at $4.1 million after just 17 games. And I'll be honest, it's been a good 17 games. He has been effective, but he's only playing 18-35 a night. It's not like he's letting it up offensively. I think he has 3 points in 17 games and has 5 this season in 50 games. Prior years, he did put up back-to-back 20-point seasons. I just don't get it. Maybe he turns into a low-end second-pair guy and is worth it. I'm not saying that's impossible, but again, that's best-case scenario, and that would be 4.1, maybe 4.5. I don't see the value in doing it now. And just, it's a general rule of thumb. Don't give guys in their late 20s or early 30s, especially defensemen, long-term deals. It's just really weird by the New York Rangers, especially when they have a prominent restricted free agent coming up in Keandre Miller. What is Keandre Miller? Keandre Miller's agent is licking his chops right now after he sees Will Borgen, who's been there for a cup of coffee, and even a guy like Ryan Lindgren, who hasn't been good this season, but has had prior success with the New York Rangers and is like a year or two younger than Borgen. But yeah, it's a very shocking deal for a guy with such a small sample size.
Agree. I hate it. Yeah. I mean, what I said about Mackenzie Blackwood was this is a guy who has consistency issues. I don't love giving him a 5-year contract, and I don't understand why you do it like a week after trading for him. Borgen's been there for a month and not a week, but like it's very much the same concept, right? He's been good there for 17 games. He has had lots of consistency issues, right? There were long stretches in Seattle where this is just like not a guy you want in your NHL lineup every night. Mm-hmm. So giving him 5 years on its own seems crazy to me, but doing it so soon after this trade, what's the point? Like, were you scared he was going to ball out so hard that you would need to give him a 6x6 in July? That's absurd to me. You're absolutely right that, if Borgen's worth the $4 million of 5 years, how much is Keandre Miller? Keandre Miller, the starting number should be $6 million then. Because you can say that Borgen's made Keandre Miller look good, but the reverse is true too, right? Borgen was awful in Seattle this year. His numbers in New York are pretty good now that he's playing with Keandre Miller. Maybe Miller's the one making Borgen look usable. It's ridiculous. I don't understand it. Drury just gives out so many longer than he needs to term contracts. Like, even if the money on its own is not that bad, there is no reason you need to commit to this for 5 years. I'm sure you could have offered him 3 years at the same money and he'd be like, this is like the best case scenario of what I'm getting in July. I'm happy to take it. I saw a member of the hockey media yesterday talking about you can't find Will Borgens every year. I cannot emphasize this enough. You literally can. You literally can find a physical, decent,
yeah.
stay-at-home third pair defenseman every single year. You can.
Yeah. We talked about it with the Blackwood deal. Why would you do it now? At least with that, he could have went on. He has been very good since that extension, and in the playoffs could ball out. Will Borgen, if he has to play serious minutes for this New York Rangers team, that means that one of Miller or Fox have gone down, and the season's probably over. There was just no upside. Maybe you could convince me that some dumb general manager, in terms of giving older defensemen money like Steve Yzerman or Ron Francis or Barry Trotz after he gave out the Brady Shea deal, would pay him like something above that, but just because they were willing to do it doesn't mean that you should.
You can just let it happen, right?
Yeah, oh, Yzerman would have given him a 6x5. Okay, he's in your conference. Let him do that. Let him ruin his own team. But yeah, just really, really weird for the New York Rangers to give this much. And I think that there is something of a new team bump when a player gets traded to a team. They're energized, they're reinvigorated because their former team said, we don't want you anymore. And especially for a guy like Will Borgen that was in a contract year, this definitely could just be the best 17-game stretch of his career. He's 28 years old. If he was 24 or 25, I could maybe buy him, new situation, really breaking out. But no, man. And you look at the New York Rangers, it's like they got EJ Emery that they just drafted. Where does he factor in down the line? Braden Schneider gets impacted by this. Like it's just interesting, and I just don't like it. I just don't like it for the New York Rangers.
Yeah, it's very funny to think about how the Rangers, maybe 3 seasons ago, had 3 different defenseman prospects who were considered absolutely untouchable, right?
Yeah,
Braden Schneider, Zach Jones, Neil Lundqvist. All of those guys were brought up as being totally 100% untouchable prospects in various deals.
2.0.
And now not a single one of them is making like a real impact at the NHL level.
Schneider's solid, but yeah.
He's fine, but he's not making a real impact. And clearly the Rangers kind of agree with that, because why else would you go out and get someone else to bump him further down the depth chart, bite into his minutes?
Yeah, it just seems, and I forgot to point this out, it seems also reactionary to Capo Caco to lock up Will Borgen. So you say, oh, Capo Caco's playing great. It just didn't happen on our team, and we got this second pair. They keep on saying that he's a second pair defenseman. He's only playing 18 minutes a night. We got this second pair defenseman locked up. Like, I didn't mess up the Kakko trade. He's doing great, whatever. But we got a better fit for our team, and he's going to be locked up. And I think, personally, it's going to be funny when Capo Caco signs some, like, 4-year deal at $5 million and continues to be a 60-ish point two-way guy, and Borgen is like bought out or traded in like 2 to 3 years, which I think is likely.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle, to be clear, good for them, should not be giving Kakko an extension right now. They should be having him play out the season and see how long this stretch lasts, figure out if he can be consistent, and then talk about a contract. Don't just pay him the first big number that pops into your head because he's been good for 3 weeks.
But again, even I would understand that more than paying Will Borgen right now.
Me too. I would understand it more, but I wouldn't do it.
Has shown flashes, is going to continue to play in the top 6 for the Seattle Kraken. Borgen's just going to continue to play 18 to 20 minutes a night, not put up numbers. Like, I know the Ranger fans are probably going to double down. It's like the confirmation bias, like me saying this and be like, it's a good deal if Mike's hating. But like, I think most NHL fans, if you're out there, like you guys probably agree that this is not a good contract, man. Just over-terming and overpaying third-pairing defensemen. We've seen it go wrong so many times of late. Like I mentioned before, the Detroit Ben Sherratt, Jeff Petrie, Scott Mayfield for my New York Islanders, although he hasn't been horrible, but still not worth 3.5 for the next 5 seasons. Just not a move. It rarely works out. And I'll happily admit if I'm wrong, if Borgen turns into a consistent 25 to 30 point, very good defensive guy. But again, even that's worth like $5 million. It's not like this is going to turn into some kind of slam dunk, in my opinion. There's a 10% chance he decently outperforms this, 10% that he slightly outperforms it, 20 to 30% chance that he's worth it, and then like a 50% chance that it's just bad by like year 2.
Yeah, technically could work, but there's a lot more downside than upside.
Okay, moving on. We got the Jacob Markstrom injury, 4 to 6 weeks. Do you think that this puts the Devils at risk of making the playoffs? I saw some people see that. Thankfully, again, because of 4 Nations, this is only like a 2 to 3 week injury in terms of actual NHL weeks missed. I think that they'll be able to survive, but what do you think?
So first of all, let's talk about the four nations just a tiny bit because I was kind of looking forward to Sweden as like a big upset team, and now there's no Olmark and no Markstrom, and things are looking
Gustafsson.
really bad. They do still have a goalie there,
Mhm.
but things are looking really bad for Sweden at the four nations with having real injuries.
Mhm.
As far as the Devils, it seemed frankly really silly to me when someone phrased it as like, are they at risk of missing the playoffs? They have a plus 27 goal difference in a conference where only 7 teams are positive on that right now. Like the Rangers and Columbus are not serious threats to catch the Devils, I don't believe. Markstrom is not like the most amazing goalie in the world. He's been pretty good. He's better than Jake Allen. The Devils are the sixth best defense in the league by expected goals against, which, you don't even need the advanced stats. You can just like read the names of their defensemen and be like, yes, this is one of the best defenses in the league. As long as you have like average competent goaltending, I think you're fine. Do I think that, the Devils maybe should be doing more moves to keep up in the standings? Maybe, probably. I mean, especially after this Carolina trade, it's like, oh, the Devils probably will fall like so far behind Washington and Carolina by the time Markstrom gets back that's where they're stuck. And you don't want a first round matchup with Carolina. Honestly, if I'm the Devils, I'd rather drop down to the wild card and play Washington in the first round than Carolina.
I think they play Toronto if they're wild card
If
one.
they're
Washington's like running away with the Eastern Conference. So yeah, but I would like either of those matchups, Toronto or Washington over Carolina. Yeah, Allen has actually been sneaky good. He has a 902 save percentage, but he has 7.1 goals saved above expected. Yeah, I think they're a lock to still make the playoffs. Rangers maybe potentially could catch them. We'll talk about that later. That's in one of the follower takes. But maybe they could go out and get like a Dan Vladar, even though Vladar has been bad this season, or a Dan Vladar type that's like dirt cheap. You throw a 5th or a 6th round pick. If you're thinking that injury is more so like 6 weeks than say 4 weeks. But yeah, I don't think that this massively impacts their playoff odds. They go from like 97% to like 95.
No, the Rantanen trade impacts the Devils' season more than this injury. I think it's, we said it last week. If you have Nemec there and he doesn't really want to be there that much, that's a potentially super valuable trade chip. Find some other player to bring in.
I don't think they should panic and do like a JT Miller though.
I wouldn't love that for them because it would be seen as a panic move, but the Devils do have tradable pieces, right? Or even if you want to keep Nemec, Seamus Casey as a prospect who's not going to be impactful in the NHL this year. That's a valuable tradable piece. Dawson Mercer, a guy who's a legit tradable piece, who's currently playing in the NHL. He's fine. To me, it feels safe to say he's kind of plateaued, and maybe he needs a change of scenery where he can get more minutes, a better line roll. Maybe he needs more time to develop. But whatever it is, I think that he's a guy who, if you have the chance to package him with a draft pick for a better player now, the Devils should take that.
Yeah, and I think Fitzgerald will be willing to do some kind of move if they start struggling, because if they miss the playoffs, even though I think that he did a lot of positive this most recent offseason, and just overall from what he took over from Ray Shero, I think, was the prior general manager, has just been great. But if they miss the playoffs again after last year was such a shit show, this year miss it with the team that they have, yeah, his seat would be very hot, and I would not blame the New Jersey Devils for firing him. But another injury that we're going to get into before the Necas would you rather that actually probably massively impacts the team's playoff percentages. Monahan is unfortunately out 6 to 8 more weeks with his injury. I love Columbus. They're a great story. This seems, even though they're getting Boone Jenner back relatively soon, this seems a little bit insurmountable. Monahan was playing like a legit top 20 center in the entire NHL. He had 41 points in 41 games. The underlying numbers were also insane. He had like a 57 or 58% expected goals percentage at 5-on-5. Him and Marchenko were like the sneaky best duo, not like actually the best duo, but like most underrated duo in the entire NHL this season. I love to see Adam Fantilli as a result. His development has been really good in the last like 12 games. He has 12 or 13 points. But yeah, probably not making the playoffs if they don't have Monahan for 2 months, it's looking like.
Unfortunately, I do agree with you there. I can't explain how Sean Monahan turned back the clock and started playing amazing hockey again, but he did, and he was truly amazing this year. Columbus, leaky holes defensively, awful goalie situation. They were surviving because of that, insane scoring.
That
They
top
had
line.
a bizarrely great offense for the names that are in that top six. Monahan was like the heart of that. I don't see how they make this work, especially because it's, the East is so tight and so close. There are so many teams right on their heels. Yesterday when I was doing the research, Columbus is in a playoff spot, and we're always one day away from, oh, well, Ottawa won and Boston won and the Rangers won, and now you're out of the playoffs. Obviously, Columbus should not be like trying to trade in for anyone to make the playoffs.
Brock Nelson to the Columbus Blue Jackets.
But it is tough because I remember you were saying Columbus might be best off selling.
Yeah,
and I said,
Provorov.
no, I really don't believe that. I think because this is such a good story, you need to at least like show the fan base that you're trying to go for it. I want to still believe that, but this makes it a lot harder to actually believe that for me.
I think this is the one of the teams like the New York Islanders that leading up to Four Nations is really going to determine what they potentially do at the deadline. Because if they go 3-6 over the next 9 games, I don't know how many games they have before Four Nations, that might tell Don Waddell all he needs to see that it was a great start to the season, and I think next year we can contend for a playoff spot, but we're probably out of it. Provorov is either the best or second best defenseman on the market, like top 5 player in terms of a rental. Let's go get our first and a third round pick, or let's go get a young roster player in that trade that could still maybe help us this season, but definitely more of a future move. So yeah, that impact does the impact of the Monahan deal is not just regarding Monahan; it's also other players' futures in Columbus.
Yeah, you are right that I guess it will help Fantilli because Fantilli still were kind of waiting for that breakout, which maybe it has more to do with his lack of opportunity than his skill. Here's your opportunity, kid, right? This team is trying to win right now. We are at least trying to. At this moment, the hope is that Columbus will make the playoffs. So, it matters if we win or lose. It matters if you're going to play great or if you're going to have some growing pains.
He's got some pressure.
Feet to the fire. Let's see how far this kid can carry us.
Yeah, I'm pissed. My first podcast that we did, me and other Matt did hot takes, and I said Fantilli 65 points, and I laid it out. I was like, he's going to be playing top line, all that stuff. But then Monahan, rightfully so, was top line. He was playing so good. But now that Fantilli is in that top line, everything that I was saying before the season has finally come true. Playing at a point per game pace, he could potentially hit 60 points. I think he's at like 30 and 50 right now. But again, a lot of that has come recently. Other hot take was the Leafs were going to be top 5 in save percentage. That's happening right now. Boom. But it's going to be interesting to see how Adam Fantilli, if this is just not a fluke, like a fluky little run, hot streak, or if he's fully going to take that next step that we thought was going to happen with him and Carlson, but had not up until this point. Do you want to do the Martin Necas? Would you rather?
Let's do it.
All right, we got some other wingers around the same age. Martin Necas is 25, 26 years old, has 16 goals, 39 assists, 55 points in 50 games. Has been a little bit cold of late, as we talked about before. Has had 42 and 27 to start the season. Insane. Up first, Jordan Kyrou. 3, 2, 1, Kyrou. I think Kyrou has come a long way defensively of late. He used to be kind of just an all offense, him and Robert Thomas, run and gun kind of guys. I'm going to go with Kyrou. This year, 21 goals, 21 assists, 42 points in 50 games. Not amazing numbers, not as good maybe this season as Martin Necas, but we've seen this guy put up like 37 goal seasons. A very talented goal scorer, great skater. I think I would opt for Necas. We're just doing it based on right now, by the way, not long term. Not factoring in Kyrou is locked up at $8.1 million just this season, and not even comparing cap hits. It's close. It's definitely close. I'm not. Colorado Avalanche fans are going to call me a hater, but I personally would go Kyrou. I think if Kyrou, he has Robert Thomas, but if he had a better team around him, he could consistently be, and has been in prior years, and this year even, like a 35 and 35 guy that could sniff 40 goals.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't keep up terribly much with the St. Louis Blues. They don't give me a great reason to. I'm just, I guess I'll have to take your word for it that he's improved defensively this year.
The underlying numbers show that.
The version of Jordan Kyrou that was around when the Blues were like
good,
decent but not amazing was like, this is the epitome of an empty points guy. He's going to put up the points. They're empty points. They're not really going to help the team win all that much. He's only as good as whoever the center around him is. And and he is a good player. Definitely a place in the league for someone who can be good in
he's
that kind of a role.
65 to 70 guy.
But Necas was not usually like so, I guess, dependent on other players.
Yeah,
he was
played on
not
the second line.
usually playing with the best of the best in Carolina. And Necas also has his own defensive struggles. Also, you could call him an empty points guy. But right now, at this moment, I'd take Necas.
That's definitely fair. Again, I think that most of these are going to be pretty damn close. Cole Caulfield, 3, 2, 1.
Caulfield.
Yeah, just such a special goal scoring talent. He has slowed down, but still 25 goals in 49 games this season. Might finally get a 40 goal season. Finally get a 30 goal season. I think that's the
hasn't got a 30 yet.
Best 50 goal scorer that never scored 30. When that finally happens, that's gonna be like they're gonna be popping champagne. But yeah, Cole Caulfield, maybe a little bit undersized. Maybe doesn't play a lot of defense, but his top skill of goal scoring is just something that very few players have. And even though, again, he hasn't put together a full season of 40-plus goals, looking like that might happen this season. And yeah, he's been great for Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot on this show about like consistency issues and sample sizes. Like, I don't think Caulfield's issue is consistency. It's really just been availability, right? Every time he's available, he's been very good and very productive. His problem has been getting on the ice for more than 40 games in a year.
Last year he was healthy, but yeah, the prior season he only played like 48.
And that was an amazing goal scoring pace in that run too.
Yeah,
that was his
like
40 goal pace
yeah,
hype there.
48, I think. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I watch Caulfield play, and I'm like, this is a really talented hockey player at what he does. This is a great goal scorer. He's a better goal scorer for sure than Necas. That's like the most valuable skill to have in the NHL. You can't accuse him of being a product of his center, right? I mean, Caulfield's arguably a better player than Nick Suzuki.
Yeah,
you don't have to agree with that argument, but like you could make it. At worst,
Suzuki,
they're like two
it's
about
1A,
the same
1A,
tier guys.
1A, 1B.
So I trust him as like his own, maybe not line driver per se, but like can be the best player on a line. That's really kind of the test I'm using. Where like, can this guy be the best player on a line and have it be an okay line? Because like I think Necas is maybe like the lowest example of someone who counts for that. Caulfield's higher up on that list.
Yeah. Matthew Boldy, 3, 2, 1. Boldy.
Oh, Boldy, I guess.
Yeah, Boldy has slowed down a decent amount, but I still think a reliable two-way 70-ish point guy is more valuable. Martin Necas maybe can take over games or make better at a higher rate, but we talk about consistency. Necas has been up and down 70 points and down to 50 this year. Probably going to finish at around 80, especially now that he's on Colorado. But Boldy, since he walked into the NHL, you could say maybe he's plateaued, but that plateau is a 70-point two-way top 20 defensive forward in the entire NHL. And part of that is because he plays with Joel Eriksson, but he's also great in his own zone. So yeah, I really like Matthew Boldy. I thought this season was going to really be the breakout, but again, still a very good player nonetheless.
Yeah, the thing that scares me off, and a month and a half ago, this would be Boldy easy, no question. Once Kaprizov went down, Boldy's scoring totally dried up. Like, it's not a random decrease. To me, there's a clear cause and effect with like, oh, Minnesota lost their best player, their best forward, and now like this power play that runs through Matt Boldy isn't very good. Can't score on it. So that does concern me. That raises some red flags maybe as to what Boldy's ceiling might be. But I do think what he's shown overall as an all-around player is better than Necas.
Yeah, that's fair. DeBrincat, 3, 2, 1.
DeBrincat, I don't feel good about it.
I'm going with Necas on this one. Yeah, I think he's just a far better playmaker and passer than Alex DeBrincat. I really don't have much to that. DeBrincat, we thought after he put up like 3 40-plus goal pace seasons in Chicago before eventually heading to Ottawa, but he is what he is at this point. He's a 65-ish point guy, 30-ish goal guy. Very good player, don't get me wrong, but I think I'd go with Martin Necas. And DeBrincat has done that the last 2 seasons and in Ottawa with pretty damn good line mates around him. Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond. I forget exactly who he played with Ottawa, but they had a pretty good top 6. So yeah, I'll go with Necas again, even though I don't think his point, I think he's closer to the player that he's been in the last 23 games. Actually, that's not fair. He's been really cold the last 23 games. But yeah, I'm saying he's in the middle somewhere in terms of being like a consistent 70-ish point guy. If he has some talent around him in Colorado, he's had the Kasperi Kotkaniemi as a second-line center has been pretty productive. So I'm going to go with Necas. People are going to say that I hate the Red Wings. It's definitely close. It depends on what your team needs. If they need goal scoring, maybe you go with DeBrincat instead. But if it was to drive its own line, I think I'm definitely going with Martin Necas.
Yeah, DeBrincat's definitely more of a scorer and less of a driver. That's pretty obvious. He's DeBrincat is Mr. Inconsistency, even more so than Necas, but he's
He's
one
hot
of
and
those
cold, yeah.
guys who I know what that ceiling looks like. That ceiling is so much higher than anything Necas has shown, and
Necas has a 70-point
hoping,
season.
I keep hoping that eventually DeBrincat will get back to that ceiling. Right?
Yeah.
If you just put him in the right situation, he can eventually be that guy again. Because that guy was really good and fun to watch, and I don't know where he's been for the last 3 years, but I've seen it before, and I'm still maybe naively believing that I can see it again.
Yeah, we thought his first 10 games in Detroit, he had like 8 goals. We're like, holy shit, Steve Yzerman pulled off the biggest fleece of the goddamn century, but then he just came back down to earth.
Nothing about the Yzer plan has gone according to plan.
Lucas Raymond has. Moritz Seider is pretty damn good. But yeah, I think you ended up going with DeBrincat, right? Yeah, just
Yes.
Ceiling. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you went with 2 for Necas. I went with only 1. Being DeBrincat. We got some follower takes. If you don't follow the Instagram, like once every 3 weeks, we get takes from you guys. Not hot takes, but kind of just like 50-50. So we get into agree or disagreements on this. We'll start with the New York Rangers, as I hinted to before, from RBSda 36. Rangers catch the Devils in the standings. 3, 2, 1. Disagree, but I think it's definitely possible. You said it wasn't really possible when we were talking about the Devils. Rangers have been damn good since I think like January 1st. They definitely had like a 9-point. I don't know if they're still on it, but like a 9-point streak. I think that Igor is locked the hell in after getting all that criticism following the contract. He was lackluster. And yeah, they're just playing better. They're still not that good of a team. They're not going to be a serious threat in the playoffs. But I think come the end of the season with this Markstrom injury, I could see the Rangers finishing with 99 points and the Devils having 98, if that makes sense.
I think that this is a big ask. If you take out the positions of number 1 goalie and number 1 defenseman and say they don't count, which I understand, that's an absurd thing. But if you just ignore those 2 pieces of the team, the Devils are so far ahead of the Rangers.
Yeah.
It's like they're not even playing the same sport.
Yeah, but you
like
have
they
a
have
top
so
3.
much depth there. Devils are better offensively, better defensively. They're better coached right now. They have more structure to them. I don't see the Devils falling like an
I agree.
8-point gap.
It would definitely have to be the Rangers surging and playing at 110-point pace from January 1st on, which they obviously are doing right now. Then say, I don't think the Devils are going to be playing 500 hockey or 45% points percentage hockey.
Yeah, I think Igor can carry them to that pace for a month. I don't think the team's good enough to do that for the rest of the year, though.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. We'll move on. Ethan Heck in taps. Hellebuck retires as the greatest goalie on a Canadian team. So solely the careers with a Canadian team. 3, 2, 1.
Agree.
Yeah, it's tough. Patty Waugh, obviously amazing on Montreal, but he didn't spend his entire career there. He only spent, what, like 10, 12 seasons on Montreal? I don't think that Hellebuck's going to win 2 cups, 2 Conn Smythes. But if he's there for his entire career, wins 3 Vezinas, and especially if it might just come down to whether or not he gets a Stanley Cup in this hypothetical. I'm not saying his career is going to be defined by that, but in order to pass a guy like Patrick Waugh that was so good, especially in the playoffs for the Montreal Canadiens, he's obviously going to have more wins in Winnipeg versus Patrick Waugh in Montreal. Might end up finishing with more Vezinas as well. So yeah, give me Connor Hellebuck. I think they go on at least one deep run with him over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I mean this is a really good question. Good question to ask here.
Yeah, thank you.
Because there's really like 3 options. I feel right.
Yeah.
Carey Price you could easily put on the list there.
I think Hellebuck. Like Canadians fans are not going to want to hear this. I think he's going to clear him pretty easily. Just because again, Carey Price after 2017 just dealt with those injuries.
Yeah, I mean I think Hellebuck probably passes him with a Vezina win this year if he hasn't already passed him, just because of the longevity and
He's
the
already at
consistency.
300 wins. Price only has like 365, I think.
Yeah. Like Roy, still phenomenal career in Montreal, but it's only 2/3 of his career. And it's tough to compare across eras like that too, right? Because the Roy Montreal era was like the most difficult era ever to be a goalie in. So maybe you need to give him more credit there and adjustment. Like the Colorado era was more of the dead puck. Montreal in the early 90s winning Vezinas with like not even a 9-10 there could be top 2 or 3 in the league. But I do, assuming Hellebuck can stay at this level for another 3 years, 4 years, I agree. I don't even think he would need a cup. I think he just needs like enough playoff runs to be like the guy in Winnipeg from this whole era.
Hmm.
Uh, I think he's probably on track to be the most awarded, celebrated, highest rated goalie of his era. So
Vasilevsky, maybe.
maybe, but you
1A,
know,
1B.
Roy also maybe, right? Roy's era of his own
Wow.
has two other guys that you could look at and say maybe. It's very close no matter how you cut it, but I do lean Hellebuck.
Yeah, you can obviously talk about Dryden. He only played for like 7, 8 years. Insane. Won 5 Vezinas and like a couple Conn Smythes. Won the Conn Smythe before he won the Calder Trophy. And Plant. But again, that's the 60s. I don't know. Like not to discredit him, but 6-team league as a goaltender, it's easy to rack up Vezinas when you were the best player on the best team. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting hypothetical. We'll finish it out with AG Rawal. He said neither the Canes or Avs win a round. I thought that we'd switch it over under 1.5 rounds won by the Canes in Avalanche. 3, 2, 1
Over.
under.
Ooh.
I think Colorado's a first round exit. And yeah, I think I guess I would predict New Jersey or Washington to beat Carolina. It's definitely a good line that I said though.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think
You're obviously if they're your cup favorite or something.
yeah,
so.
I mean, I think it's right. It's the tough part of this, and where I see the issue coming in, is that if Colorado isn't the cup favorite, or next team up, I would probably say is New Jersey, and there's a pretty decent chance they end up playing each other in the first round.
Yeah, I guess I'm just biased towards New Jersey.
Yeah, just a really tough division setup because I think both Carolina and New Jersey would beat Toronto or Florida right now, the way things are going. I'm taking the over. I do think Carolina, and it's everyone from Carolina's perspective should be like, the expectation should be the over at bare minimum, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
if you did
massive
all
failure.
of this and you can't even make the Eastern Conference Finals, the trade was a failure. No two ways
Massive.
around it. But I do think they'll get there. I think at least the Eastern Conference Finals, I like 80% odds. I feel safe.
Yeah, and let me say, like, we're not saying Colorado has no chance to win.
I think it's a very low chance. I think
I think it'd be
I
like
think we're talking
35 to
under
40.
25%.
Yeah, we'll see. Because if they're in a wild card spot, they'll either have to play Winnipeg, who they did dismantle last year, but also if they play Edmonton in the first round, I assume that Edmonton's going to be very aggressive at the deadline, considering they're in the last year of the Bouchard and Draisaitl contracts. Yeah, I think Colorado is definitely probably going to be an underdog in whatever first round matchup that they find themselves in.
Huge probably the
No,
biggest,
I wouldn't
not the
go that
biggest if
far.
Calgary ends up there, I guess, but a very big underdog, bigger than they were, in previous years when they lost in the first
Yeah, if
round.
Minnesota's healthy, if Winnipeg beefs up at the deadline, I think I would agree that they would be underdogs. But yeah, that's the full show. Actually, we're going to talk about Oscar nominations real quick. We gave out our best and worst movies of the year. Amelia Perez got 13 Oscar nominations. It's absolute blasphemy. It's the Academy thinking that they're doing the right thing by promoting a transgender movie as well as a Mexican movie in the face of Donald Trump. But it's like the worst possible movie to do because it depicts both of those problems very shallowly by a French guy, and it was shot in France. That's not transgender. That has no clue what he's talking about. It's an utter joke. If it actually wins Best Picture, I don't think the Academy will ever be able to recover in terms of its reputation. What do you think?
You're coming on pretty strong, but you're right. I did not care one bit for Amelia Perez. I think the big issue is you got this, like you said, you got this French guy coming in trying to tell this Mexican cartel story so far out of his depth, so unable to make any real point about the stuff he's talking about.
Yeah, it's a musical. The music isn't good.
Music's awful.
I think Selena Gomez, Zoe Saldana is very good. If she wins, I'd be fine with it. I think there are far better supporting actors, and also she's not even a supporting actress in that. She
literally has the most screen time in the movie.
Like that is, you can make the argument like
her name's not the title, but she does have the most minutes of screen
Yes.
time. That's a real stat there.
Yeah, it's like saying John Malkovich is the lead in becoming John Malkovich just because he has the name in it. But yeah, first off, that's category fraud. Your boy Culkin also probably could be category fraud.
Totally
as supporting
is,
actor.
yeah.
He's the co-lead, maybe a little bit less. But yeah, Selena Gomez was horrible in it. And like any Spanish speaking
She was
speaker,
not nominated though.
yeah, no, but I'm saying
That's
like I'm just
nice.
talking about the movie on the whole. I'm just
All
trashing
right.
the movie. But like any Spanish native speaker says like she's horrible at it. Like I obviously I can't tell like how she's pronunciating things. But yeah, it's a shame. Challengers got no nominations, which
Brutal.
I obviously talked about a lot last week as my second favorite movie or third favorite movie of the year. The fact that the score for that can't get nominated. I understand it was an April release. It didn't stand a chance really in terms of like best picture. Cinematography in that movie is amazing. Like that should have been a lock in terms of that. Nickel Boys, I haven't seen it yet, but got nominated for Best Picture. I'd like to see that.
Almost no one has seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet either, but
It's
I'm looking
only in
forward to
theaters.
it.
Yeah, you got to get on that.
The Brazilian movie, I'm Still Here. That was the
Fernando
real
Torres.
surprise. Best Picture nomination for Brazil.
Yeah, it's pretty hype in that regard. I'm trying to think what else was shocking.
Sebastian Stan
Yes,
getting in
for
was
Trump,
pretty surprising. I was happy to see
Jeremy
that.
Strong as well. That was on your top 3. I think that those are both powerhouse performances. I think we agree we probably have Jeremy Strong winning in that category.
I would pick him right now.
Yeah, I think he is a well-deserved. I don't think that he stands a chance to win. I think it's kind of
No, I think Culkin will end up winning. Maybe Guy Pearce if they love The Brutalist, but I doubt it.
Yeah, there's another performance I want to talk about in terms of acting. Edward Norton got in. I thought he was good in A Complete Unknown, but nothing really special. And I think Monica Barbaro was actually a pretty good inclusion. I thought she was good as Joan Baez in Complete Unknown.
She's a great singer, which I've never seen her sing in anything.
Apparently,
but
she
I was
just
blown away.
Just learned it. Yeah, she just learned it in like 2-3 years. COVID, I guess, really helped her because I just think she got cast. Mangold got nominated for Best Director, but like Denis Villeneuve and others didn't. Guadagnino didn't. Like that's insane. Complete Unknown was most just okay biopic of all time. It followed all the formula. It was just a worser version of Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash one that he also did. So I thought that was ridiculous in terms of directing. Not even, I think I threw that up on my story, talking about Mangold. Not even like commenting on, of course, it's bullshit that the Emilia Perez director got nominated, but I thought that was weird. Margaret Qualley didn't get in for The Substance. I thought that was a little bit disappointing.
I'm fine with it. I don't think she did much, quite frankly. I think Demi Moore is the whole show there.
Yeah, she just plays hot bombshell fantastically, but yeah, it's
less depth than what Demi Moore's playing.
Yes,
the script is giving her less to do.
For sure. She's great in that. No Dennis Quaid for supporting actor. Us Quaid heads were
best shrimp eating of the year, no doubt.
How does that not get cinematography? Damn shame. But anything else?
Wicked in original score. Is that an original score? That was weird to me.
That happened?
Yeah. Challengers missed, but they put Wicked in, even though Dune was disqualified because the music was not original enough. They took too much from the first one. Apparently, Wicked qualified and didn't take too much from the Broadway show. That shocked me.
that
Don't ask me to explain how that works. I don't know.
That doesn't make any goddamn sense. But yeah, that's our Oscar nominations roundup. You guys also stayed for this one. But yeah. We'll be seeing the next one. Hopefully we got another banger trade to talk about. No podcast Tuesday, obviously, unless something else happens this week's. But we'll be seeing the next one. Peace.